Pew Research Center just came out with a very massive and comprehensive poll that investigated how Americans see America over the next 30 years. Now, I love these polls because they are very large in the sense that they ask many, many questions, and they frame the questions in different ways so that we can really understand how Americans think. And so understand that this is not a typical Pew Research poll. This is a poll that has many layers to it. But let's get into the thesis of this poll, and then we'll jump into the minor details. So 60% of Americans say that in the next 30 years, U.S. will be less important in the world. That's the first thing. The second thing is that 73% of Americans say that in the next 30 years, income inequality will be worse. And then lastly, 65% of Americans say that in the next 30 years, the country will be more polarized. That was the major thesis of this poll. So there are lots of layers to that, and where they separate each question into gender, into ethnicity, into religion, and so forth. But when I went through the many pages of this poll and this research project, I got the same message that those three things were, in fact, the most important things regarding the next 30 years. Is America's influence, are we going to be the biggest country in the world? Is income inequality going to get worse? And are we going to get more divisive? And to all of those questions, the answer is yes. Apparently, that's what Americans think. Now, I would disagree with a lot of those things, and I will tell you guys my opinion after I read these statistics. Now, I went into this, into the many pages of this Pew Research poll, and I was interested in, like, what are the minor details? Because every once in a while, whenever the Pew Research Center releases a poll, there are some hidden statistics that are just like, whoa, why isn't that on the front page? Like, that's huge. Why are you trying to hide that? Right? So I went in there and I looked up all of the statistics, and there are some that were not on the front page that I think are just really, really scary. So first up, 98% of Americans. I'm about to give you a statistic that 98% of Americans agree with. Get ready. 98% of Americans are worried that the political leaders right now are not up to solving the U.S.'s biggest problems. Oh my gosh, that is a huge diss to all political leaders. Everyone is worried about how good their political leaders are at solving the U.S.'s biggest problems. If you want to, if you think that this country is not corrupt, you better think that it's corrupt now. That is corruption. There is a huge overarching problem that is worrying Americans. Now, I would argue the overarching problem is income inequality, which is one of the major theses of this poll. But we'll get to that later on. That was a huge one. I saw that one. I was like, whoa, everyone's in agreement with this one. 46% of whites believe a majority non-white population will weaken American culture. I'll read that one again. About half, 46% of white people believe if you have a majority non-white population, that would weaken American culture. Basically, 46% of people do not believe in multiculturalism. 46% of white people. Jeez, man. Like that shows, that tells a lot. So understand this, there aren't a lot of white supremacists here. But that is a white supremacist ideology. Keep that in mind. That just because we're not we're not obviously white supremacists, like from our outward expressions. I'm not saying I'm a white supremacist. You're not saying you're a white supremacist if you're white. However, there is this embedded racism in all of us, especially white people, where we don't even realize it, but we see black people different than white people. We see minorities different than white people. If you're different, then you're more likely to be racist towards them. Now, that's not true necessarily with black people against white people, because with black people, the racism is targeted against them. And so it's easier for them to not be racist against other people because they understand what racism is like. White people don't. So that's why white people were the ones that were like up to 46%. The other ethnicities were like 20-something%. 15% of Republicans and those who identify as leaning Republicans, 15% are very worried about climate change. Whoa! So there's a lot to say about this one. 15%. That means 85% of Republicans and those who lean Republican aren't that concerned about climate change. That one's very interesting to me because 67% of Republicans want the Green New Deal passed. So you have two conflicting statistics, obviously. You have people, that means that, by logic, by mathematics, you have people who are viewing climate change as not a very big problem, but they still like the Green New Deal. I actually like that. I enjoy that statistic because that means that the Green New Deal is not only popular just because of its attack against climate change, but it's also popular because people realize the economic benefits of the Green New Deal, specifically among Republicans and those who lean Republicans. That's very interesting. I am concerned, though, that only 15% of Republicans and those who lean Republicans are very worried about climate change. 61% of Democrats and those who lean Democrats are very worried about climate change. That one I'm disappointed in a lot. Democrats, wake up. We got like 10 years left. That's like an eighth of a lifetime left to completely change this planet. If we don't, we're all dead. The human race is gone. Gone. You don't believe me? Look at any other scientists. And I love, this is, I want to talk to those 15% real quick. Oh, the Republicans. Republicans. You guys believe in Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings? I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'll just say this to you. Facts don't care about your feelings, right? Climate change is a very serious problem. How do you define facts? Well, I define facts by the scientific community. How do you define your facts? Pause. This one's interesting. This one is awesome. So understand this, before I read this, 70% of over 70% of Americans want universal health care. But 88%, at least 88% of Americans support universal coverage. Now understand this. I don't support universal coverage. I support policies that are much stronger than that. But I would much rather support universal coverage than just the private healthcare system. So that's the framing of the question, and people understood that, which I really like, based on the framing of their question. But the question states, do you support providing healthcare for all that is affordable? 88% said that's either a top priority or that it's important. And then the other 12% either said that it's not a priority at all, like they don't agree with it, or it's not that important. So understand that it's at least 88% support this. Jeez, that's a pretty telling thing. By the way, when it comes to healthcare, universal healthcare, or healthcare as an issue overall, is the number one priority to Americans. Hands down, it's the number one priority. Now, that being said, it's not the number one priority for Republicans. For Republicans, 65% of Republicans want to reduce the number of undocumented immigrants in the country, and that's their number one issue. 16% of Republicans view interracial marriage as bad. Oh my gosh, are you serious? 16%? What? What is that, like one in every... I can't do math. Oh, geez. 1 in every 7 or something like one in every, I don't know. That's a pretty big portion of Republicans. More people disagree with interracial marriage as Republicans than are very worried about climate change. So let me explain what I just said there. If you see a Republican, they are more likely to disagree with interracial marriage than they are to be very worried about climate change. We're stuck in like the, Stone Age at this point. At least the Republicans are. This is the last one that I saw that was interesting. 74% of Americans say they do not want any cuts to Social Security over the next 30 years. That's a huge portion of people that don't want any cuts for 30 years. And then you have people like Donald Trump that want to cut Social Security, and they have cut Social Security, like 800-something million, 894 million, I think it was. So understand this, guys. There are a lot of things that I want to talk about here. Americans obviously know what is important. However, they are not trustworthy of the government to solve these problems. That was my overarching thesis of this. That Americans, they know what the issues are. They know what the problems are. But they don't believe in the people that they elect to solve those problems. Yikes, that's not good. Utopia for Realists really should be the first book you read if you want to know more about progressive policies. To get your free audiobook, go to the description below and click on the link to sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com.